Within the corpus of ancient Greek religious thought, the figure of Hades occupies a distinct and often misunderstood position. While frequently associated with fear or darkness in later interpretations, ancient sources portray him as a structural component of the cosmological order, rather than a malevolent entity. If you often encounter content examining how ancient cultures conceptualized life, death, and the boundaries between them, this exploration may provide a framework that aligns with broader scholarly discussions on the subject. Understanding the realm of Hades requires examining both its mythological architecture and its cultural function. The Greeks developed a complex vision of the afterlife, shaped by geography, ritual practice, literary tradition, and philosophical inquiry. References appear across a wide range of sources, from Homer and Hesiod to Pindar, Plato, and later Hellenistic authors, each offering variations that illuminate how the underworld operated within Greek cosmology. Rather than serving as a place of universal punishment, the realm of Hades represented a domain where the souls of the dead existed in accordance with moral, social, and ritual classifications. This conceptualization evolved over time, influenced by regional cults, mystery religions, and changing ideas about moral accountability. Archaeological findings from burial sites, funerary inscriptions, and votive offerings further demonstrate how beliefs surrounding Hades permeated daily life and shaped the practices of mourning, remembrance, and ancestral connection. The underworld structure, as described in ancient texts, reflects a layered model in which rivers, gates, guardians, and distinct regions form a symbolic map of the afterlife. These elements were not interpreted literally by all audiences, but served to articulate philosophical and religious ideas concerning the nature of existence beyond death. This introduction outlines the intellectual foundations required to explore the realm of Hades with precision. The sections that follow examine his origins, the geography attributed to his domain, the role of souls and judges within the underworld, and the symbolic framework through which the Greeks understood life after death.
The origins of Hades within Greek cosmology emerge from a combination of mythopoetic tradition and the broader Indo-European heritage from which many Greek deities evolved. In the genealogies preserved by Hesiod, Hades is one of the three sons of Kronos and Rhea, dividing the cosmos with Zeus and Poseidon after the Titanomachy. This tripartite structure reflects a conceptual organization of the universe into sky, sea, and the underworld, a framework that appears in multiple ancient cultures and suggests a deep-rooted cosmological logic rather than an improvised narrative arrangement. Hades' association with sovereignty over the realm of the dead does not derive from malevolence, but from the distribution of cosmic responsibilities. Unlike chthonic deities tied to fertility or agricultural cycles, Hades occupies a liminal position between divine authority and the immutable nature of mortality. Literary evidence indicates that the Greeks regarded him with reverence rather than devotion, avoiding direct invocation of his name and often substituting euphemisms such as Pluton, emphasizing wealth and subterranean abundance rather than death itself. This evolution of nomenclature reveals shifts in cultural perception. The name Hades emphasized the hidden or unseen nature of the underworld, while Pluton connected the god to the prosperity associated with the earth's depths, metals, minerals, and agricultural fertility. These dual aspects appear in various inscriptions and artistic representations, indicating that Greek religion accommodated multiple interpretive layers surrounding the same deity. Archaeological discoveries further illuminate the antiquity of underworld concepts in Greek thought. Funerary stelae, grave goods, and depictions on black figure and red figure pottery illustrate the persistence of beliefs concerning the journey of the soul, guardian entities, and the crossing into an unseen realm. Although these artifacts do not provide uniform doctrine, they demonstrate that the concept of Hades' realm served both a religious and social purpose, structuring ideas about mortality, moral order, and the continuity of lineage. Philosophical texts from the classical period reinterpret Hades through new frameworks. Plato's dialogues integrate the underworld into discussions of justice and the soul's purification, while Pindar's odes emphasize reward and ritual observance. These sources reveal that Hades was not a static figure, but a theological construct adapted by poets, priests, and thinkers to articulate evolving conceptions of the afterlife. Through these intersecting traditions, the figure of Hades emerges not merely as a mythic ruler, but as a conceptual anchor for the Greek understanding of death and its place within a balanced cosmic system. The next section turns to the geography of his domain, tracing the symbolic landscapes that structure the ancient Greek vision of the underworld.
The geography of the realm of Hades reflects a symbolic landscape rather than a physical environment, constructed through layers of poetic description, ritual tradition, and philosophical interpretation. Ancient authors did not present a single, unified map of the underworld. Instead, they offered models shaped by regional belief, literary purpose, and evolving religious concepts. These variations reveal how the Greeks conceptualized the passage from life to death through images of thresholds, rivers, guardians, and stratified regions. In Homeric epics, the underworld lies at the boundaries of the known world, approached through distant western lands near the Oceanus. This liminal placement underscores the idea that death exists beyond ordinary experience, accessible only through ritual or divine intervention. Later sources relocate the entrance to specific earthly sites, volcanic fissures, cavern systems, or remote coastlines, reflecting the Greek tendency to anchor mythic geography in familiar landscapes while maintaining its symbolic distance. Rivers form one of the most persistent structural elements of Hades' realm. The Styx, Acheron, Cocytus, Lethe, and Phlegethon each embody aspects of death's transition from oath-binding and sorrow to forgetfulness and purification. These rivers appear not only in literary works, but also in funerary inscriptions and Orphic gold tablets, suggesting that they functioned as conceptual markers guiding the soul's movement through the afterlife. Their descriptions combine natural imagery with theological meaning, indicating that geography served both narrative and ritual roles. Gateways and guardians further define the underworld's topology. The entrance is often portrayed as a monumental threshold watched by entities such as Kerberos, the many-headed hound, whose role is to prevent the dead from leaving the realm. This figure, while mythological, symbolizes the irrevocability of death and the controlled boundaries between the worlds of the living and the dead. Archaeological depictions of Kerberos on pottery and reliefs reinforce his role as a metaphoric rather than literal guardian. The deeper regions of Hades, Tartarus, the Asphodel meadows, and the Elysian fields reflect differing interpretations of the soul's posthumous condition. Tartarus appears in Hesiod as a cosmic prison for divine transgressors, while the Asphodel meadows serve as a neutral domain for ordinary souls. The Elysian fields, by contrast, represent an idealized environment reserved for heroes or those associated with specific rites. These varied landscapes reveal that ancient Greek concepts of the afterlife were not monolithic, but stratified according to mythic tradition and ethical thought. Philosophers of the classical period built upon this imagery to articulate metaphysical models of the soul. Plato's descriptions in the Phaedo and Republic integrate the geography of Hades into moral and cosmological arguments, transforming poetic spaces into allegorical structures. Such reinterpretations demonstrate how geography functioned as a flexible medium for exploring existential themes.
This symbolic geography forms the framework through which the roles of souls, judges, and the internal organization of Hades' realm can be understood. The next section turns to the nature of souls within this domain and the processes attributed to their posthumous existence.
The concept of the soul in the realm of Hades derives from a long continuum of Greek thought shaped by epic poetry, funerary practice, and philosophical reflection. In Homeric texts, the psyche is presented as a diminished yet conscious remnant of the individual, retaining memory and identity while lacking the physical agency associated with life. This portrayal emphasizes the separation between bodily vitality and posthumous existence, constructing the soul as a shadow-like entity inhabiting a domain defined by stillness and distance from earthly experience. Later sources introduce more differentiated models. Hesiod and subsequent poetic traditions incorporate distinctions between ordinary souls, heroic figures, and divine beings, emphasizing ritual observance and moral conduct as factors influencing the soul's post-mortem status. These developments coincide with wider cultural shifts in burial customs, as evidenced by grave goods, inscriptions, and iconography that suggest increasing concern with guiding the soul through the afterlife. The Orphic tradition offers a more elaborate vision, positioning the soul's journey as part of a cyclical process involving purification, memory, and eventual liberation. Gold tablets discovered in southern Italy and Crete record ritual instructions directing the soul toward specific paths and away from misleading forces associated with Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. These texts illustrate the diversity of Greek beliefs and demonstrate that understanding the soul's fate required engagement with multiple doctrinal layers rather than a single authoritative narrative. Philosophical authors, especially Plato, transform these traditions into metaphysical frameworks. His dialogues describe the soul as a form of immortal essence, whose condition after death corresponds to its moral and intellectual cultivation during life. In these accounts, the realm of Hades functions not only as a location, but as a conceptual space where ethical consequences are articulated through symbolic geography. Such interpretations elevate the soul from a passive remnant to an active participant in a moral cosmology. Across these varied traditions, the soul's presence in Hades is defined by transition rather than permanence. Ancient Greek thought consistently frames death as a movement into another state, one shaped by ritual propriety, social memory, and the metaphysical principles that govern the universe. The soul becomes a vehicle through which ideas about justice, identity, and cosmic order are expressed. This conceptual foundation prepares the way for examining the figures responsible for assessing the soul's condition and determining its placement within the underworld's structured landscape. The next section turns to these judicial entities and the role they played in shaping Greek perceptions of post-mortem fate.
Within the structured landscape of the Greek underworld, the role of the judges emerges as a mechanism for articulating moral and social order. Literary sources describe three principal figures: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, whose authority reflects both mythological lineage and cultural ideals surrounding justice. Their presence in the realm of Hades does not represent a bureaucratic system in the modern sense, but rather a symbolic framework through which ancient thinkers expressed concepts of accountability, ethical conduct, and the continuity of communal norms beyond death. In Homeric texts, Minos appears seated with a scepter, resolving disputes among the dead. This depiction aligns with his reputation in myth as a lawgiver and founder of institutional order on Crete. Rhadamanthus and Aeacus, likewise associated with justice and kingship during life, become agents who apply these qualities in the afterlife. Their functions reflect a broader principle observable in many cultures: the projection of ideal rulers into the realm of the dead as guarantors of fairness and stability. The selection of these individuals also illustrates genealogical symbolism. As sons of Zeus, or in some versions, descendants of divine human unions, they occupy a liminal space between mortal authority and divine sanction. Their presence at the threshold of moral adjudication serves to bridge human ethical expectation with the cosmic order embodied by the Olympian hierarchy. This blend of genealogy and function underscores the cohesive structure of Greek mythological systems. Pindar and later lyric poets enrich the roles of the judges by connecting them to specific regions of the underworld. Rhadamanthus is associated with Elysian fields, suggesting expertise over reward and purification, while Aeacus is linked to the gates of Hades, symbolizing vigilance and boundary control. These associations establish spatial nuance within the underworld narrative, reinforcing the idea that judgment is not an abstract decision, but a placement within a differentiated afterlife landscape. Philosophical sources, particularly Plato, reinterpret the judges as exemplars of impartiality, emphasizing their freedom from earthly corruption. In his dialogues, the judges appear as figures capable of discerning the true condition of the soul, unaffected by external status or reputation. This shift reflects classical-era ethical concerns and elevates judgment from mythic narrative to moral metaphor. Across all of these traditions, the judges function as mediators between human life and the cosmic principles governing the afterlife. They embody the Greek understanding that moral evaluation persists beyond physical existence and that death represents a transition into a domain shaped by justice as well as necessity. This judicial framework prepares the ground for examining how the underworld itself is divided into distinct regions, each corresponding to different fates assigned to the soul. The next section turns to these internal divisions and the symbolic meaning they held in Greek thought.
The internal structure of the underworld, as described in Greek literary and philosophical traditions, consists of multiple regions whose symbolic functions articulate differing understandings of post-mortem existence. These realms do not represent a single uniform doctrine, but rather a constellation of concepts shaped by poetic convention, ritual practice, and evolving theological thought. Their arrangement reflects the Greek tendency to organize metaphysical ideas into spatial frameworks that communicate moral, cosmological, and communal values. The Asphodel meadows, appearing prominently in Homeric texts, form the primary destination for most souls. This region is portrayed as a neutral expanse, neither punitive nor rewarding, where individuals exist without the distinctions that defined their earthly lives. The symbolic neutrality of Asphodel underscores the early Greek view that the majority of human lives were not subject to extreme moral categorization. Instead, the realm mirrors a continuation of existence marked by simplicity and distance from the passions of the living world. By contrast, Elysium, or the Elysian fields, represents an idyllic environment reserved for select individuals, such as heroes, favored mortals, or those associated with particular rites. Pindar and later poets describe Elysium as a place of gentle breezes, sunlight, and ease, reflecting ideals of honor and moral refinement. In philosophical texts, Elysium becomes a metaphor for the soul's purification, aligning the concept with ethical cultivation rather than birth or heroic status alone. The region of Tartarus occupies a more complex position. In Hesiod's Theogony, Tartarus functions as a cosmic prison for divine offenders rather than a destination for ordinary human souls. Its depiction emphasizes depth, confinement, and elemental forces, highlighting the separation between human morality and divine transgression. Over time, later sources expand its function, incorporating elements of punishment for severely immoral individuals, though these additions vary across traditions and should not be seen as universally accepted doctrine. Several rivers, Styx, Lethe,
Acheron, Cocytus, and Phlegethon also structure the internal geography of Hades' realm. Their symbolic meanings extend beyond physical boundaries. Styx represents oath-binding and inviolable divine order. Lethe signifies forgetfulness or purification. Acheron embodies sorrow, and Phlegethon's fiery imagery conveys transformation. These rivers appear in funerary inscriptions and Orphic tablets, suggesting that they served as conceptual guides for understanding the soul's progression through the underworld. Plato's philosophical reinterpretations tie these realms together within a moral and metaphysical framework. In his dialogues, the underworld becomes a structured environment where souls are sorted according to their actions, reflecting the increasing importance of ethical reasoning in classical thought. Yet this rationalization does not replace earlier imagery. Instead, it overlays symbolic geography with philosophical meaning. Across all variations, the realms of Hades illustrate the Greek effort to define postmortem existence through spatial differentiation, moral categories, and symbolic landscapes. The next section turns to the visual and ritual symbols associated with Hades himself, exploring how these markers shaped cultural understanding of his authority and domain.
The symbols associated with Hades reveal how the ancient Greeks conceptualized his authority and the broader structure of the underworld. These symbols do not function merely as decorative elements, but as cultural markers that signal divine jurisdiction, cosmic order, and the boundaries between life and death. Their persistence across literary sources, vase paintings, funerary art, and philosophical texts indicates that symbolic representation played a central role in shaping how the Greeks understood Hades' domain. One of the most prominent symbols is the Helm of Invisibility, described in epic and mythographic sources as an object that renders its wearer unseen. Although associated at times with heroes such as Perseus, its original attribution belongs to Hades, reflecting the etymological connection between his name and the notion of the unseen realm. This symbol highlights the god's distance from direct human interaction and the conceptual invisibility that defined his authority over the dead. The bident, a two-pronged implement, often contrasted with Poseidon's trident and Zeus's thunderbolt, appears in later artistic traditions as an emblem of Hades' sovereignty. While not present in early epic descriptions, the bident becomes a recurrent symbol in Hellenistic and Roman visual culture, emphasizing the structured differentiation among the three divine brothers. Its emergence illustrates how artistic conventions contributed to the codification of divine identities. The cornucopia, or horn of plenty, provides a more complex representation. Associated with Hades under his epithet Pluton, it signifies the wealth of the earth, metals, minerals, and agricultural abundance, rather than death itself. This reflects the Greek understanding that the underworld was not solely a place of endings, but also the source of hidden resources that sustained human life. The dual imagery of death and fertility mirrors the broader connection between chthonic deities and the cycles of nature. Kerberos, the many-headed guardian of the underworld's entrance, functions as a symbol of boundary enforcement rather than malevolence. Artistic depictions show variations in the number of heads, tails, and serpentine attributes, yet all emphasize his role in maintaining the separation between the living and the dead. His presence in funerary art reinforces this symbolic function, underscoring the irrevocability of death's transition. Rivers associated with Hades also carry symbolic weight. The waters of Lethe in particular represent forgetfulness or purification depending on the doctrinal context. Orphic tablets instruct initiates to avoid Lethe and seek Mnemosyne instead, suggesting that the symbolic geography of the underworld operated as part of ritual and philosophical systems rather than as simple mythic scenery. Color symbolism further shapes the representation of Hades. Dark mineral pigments, subdued reds, and earth tones dominate ancient depictions, reflecting both the literal association with subterranean realms and the conceptual distance from the luminous world of the Olympians. These visual conventions appear across vase painting, terracotta figurines, and engraved stone reliefs,
establishing a coherent artistic vocabulary. Taken together, these symbols reveal how Hades' identity was constructed through material culture, ritual language, and philosophical interpretation. They allowed ancient audiences to perceive the structure of the underworld not as a chaotic space, but as a domain ordered by specific rules and markers of divine authority. This symbolic framework sets the stage for understanding the enduring legacy of Hades in later cultural, religious, and intellectual traditions. The next section turns to that legacy and the ways in which the figure of Hades continued to influence thought beyond antiquity.
The legacy of Hades within the historical and intellectual traditions of the Mediterranean world extends far beyond the boundaries of ancient Greek religion. As Greek culture interacted with Roman, Near Eastern, and later European thought, the figure of Hades evolved into a symbolic reference point for discussions of mortality, justice, and the unseen dimensions of existence. This transformation reflects not a loss of identity, but a gradual layering of interpretations that preserved core features while adapting them to new conceptual frameworks. In Roman contexts, Hades became closely associated with Pluto, a syncretic figure emphasizing wealth, subterranean power, and the generative aspects of the earth. This reinterpretation shifted the focus from the austerity of the underworld to the abundance hidden beneath the surface, aligning with Roman economic and cultural values. Yet even within this transformed identity, the structural role of the underworld remained intact, illustrating the adaptability of Greek mythological concepts when absorbed into foreign intellectual systems. Early Christian authors engaged with Hades as both a cultural inheritance and a theological contrast. While rejecting the polytheistic dimensions of Greek cosmology, they employed terminology and imagery derived from classical sources to articulate emerging doctrines concerning death and the afterlife. This process created a linguistic continuity in which the term Hades persisted as a conceptual marker, detached from its original deity, yet still shaping the structure of eschatological discourse. In medieval and Renaissance scholarship, Hades served as a point of comparison for allegorical and philosophical interpretations of the afterlife. Humanist writers, drawing on classical texts, incorporated descriptions of the underworld into moral treatises, commentaries, and artistic works. Their engagement with Hades highlights the enduring influence of Greek conceptual frameworks in shaping Western intellectual history. Visual representations of Hades also demonstrate remarkable continuity. From vase paintings and stone reliefs to medieval manuscripts and early printed books, the iconography associated with the god, helm, bident, Kerberos, and chthonic color palettes remained recognizable across centuries. These recurring motifs reflect the persuasive power of symbolic imagery to transcend religious transitions and cultural boundaries. In modern scholarship, Hades continues to serve as a focal point for exploring ancient perceptions of death, justice, and cosmology. Archaeologists analyze burial practices that illuminate beliefs associated with his domain, while historians examine textual variations that reveal regional differences in Greek eschatology. Philosophers and classicists, meanwhile, draw on Hades to investigate broader questions concerning the relationship between myth and moral reasoning. The legacy of Hades, therefore, lies not in a single definitive interpretation, but in the cumulative influence of the ideas, symbols, and cultural structures associated with his realm. Through this layered transmission, the figure of Hades remains a significant point of reference in the study of ancient religion and the intellectual traditions that evolved in dialogue with it.